Somewhere in the time of history, you were born. And when you were born and where you were born gave you the belief system that you carry today, most likely. It's a rare exception otherwise. To put it another way, if you were born in the 20th or 21st centuries, it is highly doubtful that you would be invoking Zeus as your god, or Mithra, or Horus, or any of those gods. If you were born in the South, the United States, southern part of the United States, pretty much anywhere in the United States, it's slim chance that you would invoke Hare Krishna as your god, and very few proclaim Allah, the Muslim god, as their god, even though there are more and more of those in our country today. Your belief, your interpretation of a god is based primarily on when and where you were born. That's just a fact. Even the Bible says there are many gods and many lords, even though most Christians will look at you and simply say, there's only one God. And that's just far from a fact. There may be the God that you believe in. But whatever God that you believe in, if any, we have to stop and we have to think about this God. Whether you call this God Jehovah, Allah, Hare Krishna, Zeus, whatever, Thor, whatever name you choose to identify your God, the one you believe is the true God with, you have to set aside holy books for a moment and interpretations imposed on you by churches and other institutions and even other people, and just think about this God for a moment. Think about what any God, any creator of all things, of everything we see around us, nature, the planets, the universe, life itself, exactly what would go through the mind of a God. When we look at the Bible, and many people look at this and identify it as the Word of God, we have to look at history, we have to look at what's taken place and what we have learned for fact over time. There was a time in our history when thunder was thought to be the voice of God. We now know that not to be true. Burning bushes popping up in the wilderness, well, we know that comes from strikes of lightning. Galileo got in trouble with the church because he dared to put forth the concept that the earth revolved around the sun. Prior to that, the majority opinion was that the earth was the center of the universe. It took 350 years before the church caught up with that fact that the sun does not revolve around the earth, that we revolve around the sun. All through this history, from the beginning of recorded history until now, what was once believed and taught about a God has changed because of what we have learned. The things that man used to see and deal with, similar to the things we see today, were mysterious, were to them supernatural, unexplained events. And they would theorize, philosophize, they would sit around, and of course they didn't have the tools that we've got for distraction. At that point in time in history, the evening came, darkness came upon the earth, And at best, they may have a torch for light. They may sit around and without all the ambient light we have today, they could look out and see the universe, the stars, the wonder, even of the clouds in the daytime, the shapes and the forms and the way the sunlight hit the earth and the atmosphere. Not understanding these things, the original gods, according to records kept by our forefathers, if you will, going back into history. The original gods were gods based on the sun, Saturn, and so forth. So it's not too hard a jump to get to the conclusion that these holy books, whether it be the Quran, whether any other ancient writings, were not messages from a God, but were men's identifying and interpreting what they thought was a God. Even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we start out with the story of Adam and Eve, the creation account, the 6,000 years of creation account, which very few hold to that fundamentalist belief today. The Jews had certain rituals that they performed, animal sacrifices, putting blood on the doorpost. Plague hit Egypt, and so they surmised the angel of death, and to protect the firstborn, they would take the blood of a sacrificed animal and paint it on their doorpost for protection. Clearly, nothing more than mere superstition. Then Jesus came along, supposedly around the 1st century, and he took the religion that he was born into, Judaism, the law of the Jews that he was born under, that he knew, and the culture he was in, and he made drastic suggestions about that. And from there, a new way of viewing God came forth. It's important to accept this, not so much as to say that there's no God. We'll not get into that debate or argument today, but to understand our place in time and history and to understand the proper view of a God, should you choose to believe in one. The writings you hold in your book, called the Bible, we have a good record of where these writings came from. We have a good record of how this book was put together. We get into the 1940s, and what's commonly called the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in a cave, old writings, and that revealed more. We understand what happened in the 4th century, Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, and what took place there, and how these letters that were compiled in this book were chosen, where they came from. We know that the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," is almost very closely plagiarized from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. We know that the last 12 verses of Mark is agreed upon by all theologians, Bible scholars, as not being in the oldest records, earlier records of the writings that's compiled into the Bible. We know that the oldest manuscript of any sort that we have of this book goes back to 150 years post the supposed life of Jesus and death of Jesus. And that oldest manuscript, if you will, is the size of a playing card. There's not much on it. Certainly not enough to validate anything in this book. As time has progressed and man's views toward a God and culture, society, and life have changed, the more that we've learned about nature. Spring brings the flowers. We know where storms come from. We know where thunder comes from. We know about lightning. We've learned all these things. And so we look at things, even in the Bible, differently now than many did earlier on. We don't, for the most part, look at the story of Noah and the flood as a literal thing that Noah could have built this wooden boat and gathered up 2 of every species of animal on the planet, and that God flooded the entire earth, including men, women, and children, and saved only Noah and his family on this boat. We know that that's not a practical thing to believe. We know that 40 days and 40 nights on such a craft, how would you feed 2 of every species? How would you actually gather up and put all these species in this boat? How would you deal with the waste that resulted from all this life being on that boat, the unsanitary conditions and so forth? It's unpractical. It's just impractical to believe that that's a literal story. Jonah getting swallowed by what's commonly called a whale. The Bible doesn't say a whale, it says a big fish. And being in that fish 3 days and 3 nights, and then being vomited out by the fish, is an impractical story. It's a story that sounds like a fable, a myth. Interestingly enough, that same Jonah being swallowed into the belly of the fish 3 days, 3 nights, coincides with the story of Jesus being put to death and laying in the grave 3 days and 3 nights and then coming back to life. The story of Lot and his family, Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're approached by angels. The angels were invited into Lot's, and then some of the men of the town saw these beautiful angels, who I guess had materialized, and wanted to have relations with them. So what does Lot do? He has to protect angels and offer up his virgin daughters. It's not a practical thought. It's not a reasonable thought. It's not something that any reasonable person would do. If men came knocking on your door because they saw someone enter and they wanted that person or people that had entered your home and you had a virgin daughter, I really don't think you're going to offer up your virgin daughter to protect this person. I just don't think that's going to happen. But it goes on from there. The impracticality of these stories, the unbelievability of these stories. Lot and his family are told to leave the town, leave their belongings. They head up to get to the side of a mountain. The Sodom and Gomorrah is burning to the ground. And Lot's wife turns around to look and sees her house being destroyed, and what happens? She's turned into a pillar of salt. Is that reasonable to believe? I mean, is that really something that you really sink your teeth into and say, oh yes, that shows the power of God? In conjunction with other elements of this story, especially when just a short time later, these 2 virgin daughters of Lot get their father drunk, have sex with him, get impregnated by him. Do you ever stop and think about what you're believing? Do you ever give a consideration as to the significance of these things and how it affects your life when you dogmatically grab a hold of such stories as if they were truths and facts. Abraham and Sarah, his wife, had tried for years. Sarah was barren. She couldn't get pregnant. Older age. Well, in fact, during that course of time, in desperation to have a male child, she says, Abraham, take my slave servant girl here and have relations with her. Get her pregnant so you can have a son. Is that something you would do? I don't think they had artificial insemination back then. So literally, Abraham had to have sex with his slave. Get her pregnant. Of course, that created its own problems because Sarah eventually became pregnant with Isaac. And there was jealousy between the two sons. And then it went worse than that because all of a sudden Abraham hears a voice from the sky that says, Abraham, I'm going to test your faith. I want you to take your son Isaac. I know you've waited 100 years to have this kid, but take your son Isaac up to the side of the mountain here, and I want you to prove your faith by sacrificing him to me. Is that a reasonable thing to believe? Is that something you would do with your child? You and your wife have tried just 30, 40 years to have a child, and all of a sudden you have a male child and celebrate it, and it's wonderful. Forget the fact that your wife said, look, go have relations with the next door lady and see if you can have a baby with her. I just highly doubt that. But then all of a sudden your child gets to be 18, 20 or whatever, grows up, older son, and then Dad comes along and says, I heard a voice. That voice told me I gotta prove my faith. I'm gonna don't tell Isaac this, but we're gonna be gone for a couple of days. We're gonna go up the mountainside here because, sorry Sarah, I gotta sacrifice him to God. I gotta prove my faith. This all-knowing God. True, the story says that an angel came along and stopped the killing right before it happened. But can you imagine the trauma? You're Isaac, your dad's leading you up there, and Isaac's saying, where's this animal we're going to sacrifice? And Abraham says, the Lord will provide. Next thing you know, Dad's tying you up with a rope and raising a knife to you. I'm sure you're going to have good relations with your dad from there on out, aren't you? You're going to have a lot of respect for him, aren't you? But you believe these stories simply because you're told in a book that's maybe 1,600 years old that these stories are true. Without thought, without consideration. The creation account itself. Do you ever think about this? God creates all these wonderful things. He creates the universe, the stars, the moon, the galaxies. And then he creates this little tiny speck out here that we call Earth. Vegetation, creates an atmosphere around it, and these biological creatures that can survive. But in the midst of that, he puts one tree. And he tells the first humans, anything out here is yours. He didn't say don't eat the poison ivy or don't eat this poisonous berry. He says don't eat fruit of this tree. That's the warning he gave. He didn't say be careful of this talking snake. No warning there. He just simply said don't eat of this fruit of this tree because if you do, you're going to die. So of course, I don't know how many of you have kids, but you send them up into a room, say, I'm going to be gone for all day, and just have at it, have fun, but whatever you do, stay away from this drawer. Don't ever open that drawer. If you open that drawer, I'm going to beat your butt. Really? So what do you think the kid's going to do? I don't think the kid needs a talking snake to get him to look in that drawer. Every day you leave, you're telling them, just have at it, enjoy yourself, go anywhere in the house you want to, but whatever you do, stay out of that drawer. All you're doing is tempting the kid. The kid's gonna look in that drawer. I think most of you probably are aware of this fact. So a snake comes down. So God, this all-knowing God, does not realize that he's got this beautiful angel he created. He doesn't realize this. He doesn't realize that I've got this beautiful angel that's going to use a snake and play ventriloquist and tempt this woman. And guess what? This woman is going to fall prey to what this snake tells her to do. She's going to eat the fruit of this tree, and it's not going to turn out good. So you've got to think about these stories. In the beginning, God created all these things. In the beginning, God gave life. It's often said, and I've often heard, that, oh, the earth is just perfect for life. It's perfect for humans. And the fact is, the earth is not perfect for life or perfect for humans. The earth is good at one thing. The earth is good and it's right for giving birth to life. It is horrible at sustaining life. 99% of the species that's ever existed on this planet are gone, extinct. They're no more. So the challenge is to think about what you're believing. It's not my position to tell people what to believe. It's my position to speak about facts, about what we know, and to challenge your thought and to try to make you think. It's fine to be a Star Wars fan. It's fine to prefer a Dodge over a Chevy. It's fine to like red instead of pink. It's fine to not like fish but like beef. But it's not fine to condemn those that prefer